My name is Clark. I am one of 3 people who can truthfully say they have time traveled. It is not what you think it's like. I'm not really certain how they selected us. I was working on my bachelor's degree at my state university when I was approached by the team. Project BTAO33 is what they called it. No cool name like Project X or Project Alpha Time Warp or something along those lines. Just BTAO33, whatever that means. They approached me and asked if I'd like to take part in an experiment in exchange for my tuition being paid for. I only had a year left in school, but those 2 semesters were going to cost me $32,000. So, of course, I said yes. When I asked what the experiment was, they told me it was extremely secretive. I would be finding out details the day of, then I could decide to back out if I didn't want to participate. About 6 weeks went by, and I was basically on call to be ready to go whenever they needed me. Finally, I got the call. I live in Atlanta, and the team had the 3 of us meet up in a parking deck about 20 minutes outside the city. Once there, we all got in one of those short school buses, and they took us out to the northern Georgia mountains. It was about a 2-hour drive, and we didn't really get much time to get to know each other. We were under strict rules not to reveal information about ourselves or talk to each other on the bus ride over. The last couple of miles were on a rocky dirt road leading down a mountain.
The bus parked in a small, maybe half-acre stretch of grass. The grass was freshly mowed, and I could tell by sight and smell. The alcove of grass was enclosed by large trees from the surrounding forest. "All right," a man stood up from his seat at the front of the bus. "We're here. I'll brief you all once we get inside the house." As we got off the bus one by one, we could see that in the center of the clearing was a building. It had one very large window on one side, basically encompassing that entire wall. Every other wall was black on the outside, and I could see through the window that the inside was painted white. There was a large silver metal ring that surrounded the house. It came about 3 inches off the freshly mowed grass, was a foot wide, and had lights coming from drilled holes all the way around it. "Watch your step, and please do not step on top of this ring," the same man said. "Once we get inside, just go ahead and take a seat." We all stepped over the ring and made our way into the house. The house, as the man called it, was made up of only one room. Inside, there were 4 chairs around a rather large circular table. The chairs, table, walls, and the 1 lamp were all white. The only thing that wasn't white in the room were the pair of bookshelves against each wall, both empty. After we all took our seats, the man introduced himself. "All righty. Welcome, welcome. My name is Dr. Olson. I'm glad you all decided to take part in this, to take part in history. As we told you all, this is extremely sensitive information. After my explanation of what this experiment consists of, I'll ask you if you want to continue. Understand?" "What if we don't want to continue?" a woman said, about my age with fiery red hair. "Then we know this super secret information, right? And you're going to let us walk out of here?" The man gave a smile. He knew this would be asked. "Yes, you are free to leave here knowing what the experiment consists of. However, the university and I are confident of 3 things. 1, you won't want to leave. 2, the university's attorneys are rather powerful, and you already signed the NDAs. And 3, no one will believe you if you tell them."
We exchanged pleasantries, talked about our schooling and how we were selected. Emma was the first to ask what we were all thinking. "So, what's the chance this is legit? Don't get me wrong, I would love to be the world's first time traveler, but I feel like this is going to end in a dud, or we are just being pranked." "Yeah," Ryan replied. "When he was explaining everything, I thought it may be a prank. Like, this may be an actual experiment from the university, but it's an experiment to see if they can convince people they time traveled." "That's meta," I quipped. "Oh, guys, look!" Emma was staring out the large window. The ring that surrounded the building was slowly getting brighter. It looked like 100 laser pointers slowly brightening, shining up into the overcast sky. "Does this mean we are in the 2-minute warm-up?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I guess so," Emma started. "God, my heart is racing." "Mine too." "Same." We all stood, perfectly still, watching those skinny beams of light growing brighter until it was nearly blinding. I turned to look at Emma. Her pupils were closing to the size of a pencil tip, maybe smaller. Her gaze, along with Ryan's, was locked on the beams. I could see their faces getting more illuminated each second that passed. Second after second, it just kept getting brighter, brighter and brighter and brighter until it was like we were being engulfed by the sun. And in less than a second, it was dark. I chose my words carefully. Less than a second. It was not like turning off a light. It was not like shutting your eyes. It was faster. It was instant. I saw Emma's pupils quickly grow large as the absence of light from out the window met her retina. The inside of the house was still illuminated, thanks to one lamp in the main room. Outside the window was nothing. Not nighttime, not black, not pitch black. Nothing. It almost had a color to it, but one I cannot explain. It gave off no light. It was the color that a blind man sees. It was the color of our sleeping nights in between dreams. It was the color of death. It was nothing. We all kind of looked around after about a minute of silence, all staring out the same window into a void of absence. "What the fuck is happening?" Emma said in a shaky voice. I don't, I began. "My heart stopped beating," Ryan said bluntly. I saw Emma raise 2 fingers to her neck. I didn't have to. I could feel it. It was one of the first things I noticed. When I was staring at Emma's pupils as the light reached its crescendo, my heart was racing, and as soon as the light disappeared, so did the rhythmic thumps of my heart. Fuck, 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 what the fuck is happening?" Emma began to panic.
Wait, this is just a part of it, Ryan started. I'm really freaked out too, trust me. Obviously something is happening. If you believe the doctor, which I'm starting to, we may be, traveling through time. I actually agreed with him. Yeah, you're right. We just need to pay attention to this so we can explain later. Okay, heartbeat stopped. Check. We're still alive. Check. And that void? Abyss? Thing? Check. We turned to the window in unison. I don't like looking at it. It's unnatural. I don't know, not supposed to be. It's not black, but it has no light. I don't think. She wasn't wrong. I'm kind of glad I don't have a heartbeat right now because I think I'd have a heart attack, I joked. Anxious laughs filled the small space. We finally moved from our spots where we were staring out the window. It was a relief to move around the room, and I'm not sure why. We were quiet for a couple of minutes. Emma was sitting in a chair with her knees tucked up to her chest, occasionally checking her not-existent pulse or looking at her hands. Ryan leaned against the back wall, staring out the window. I pulled up a chair next to Emma's and joined in her quiet atmosphere. Our peaceful still was broken with Ryan's words. "Clark? Emma? There's something out there." We looked at him, then out the window. "What do you mean?" "Out there. I can see things." "Your mind is playing tricks on you. Like when you're in a pitch-black room, your mind will make you see lights and shapes and stuff?" I said. "No," he countered. "It's there. Look out there. You can see it. I don't know how to describe it. Just look." Emma and I both turned our attention once again to the emptiness. It was still. It was quiet. It was unmoving. Abnormal. Yet it felt like it was meant to be there. Like it was at home, and we were its intruders. "I don't see anything," Emma said. "Me either."
Ryan continued to stare out, unflinching. Emma and I stayed at the table, fiddling with our fingers and nervously finger-tapping. I'm not sure how much time had passed before the silence was broken. All I know is it felt like a long time. Maybe an hour? Maybe 2? "Well, this is taking quite some time, isn't it?" Emma said. "Seriously, I feel like we've been in here for a couple of hours," I responded. "No, not even a second has passed," he said. Emma and I glanced looks of confusion at each other. "What'd you mean?" "Not even a second has passed," he repeated. His gaze was still locked on the void. "Time doesn't pass in here. When you look into it, you see no time has passed, no time will pass. When you look into it, it all makes sense." Emma and I locked eyes once again, yet this time it was less confusion and more terror. I spoke up. "Come on, man, stop messing with us." He did not reply. He did not blink. Days passed, I think. Emma and I sat and talked a lot. We did not grow hungry, tired, or thirsty. We did not have to use the bathroom. We came to a few realizations. One was that there was no temperature in the room. It was an absence of any heat or coolness. Air was non-existent. After roughly 12 hours, or so we estimated, our bodies began to not breathe automatically. We didn't need oxygen. The other realization was about that void. Ryan had been staring off into it for the entirety of our stay, save for the first couple of minutes. He has not moved. He has not blanked. Sometimes he mumbles something about time or the universe, but most of it is gibberish. Emma and I decided that maybe something is in there. We can't see it, but Ryan can, and it's driving him insane. We decided it's best not to look at it for too long. After weeks of being stuck in that room, Emma and I were growing increasingly restless. We started arguing about little things and eventually stopped talking altogether. Sometimes I would hear her sob, trying to be quiet. I spent a lot of my time crying as well. No tears could come out, though. Emma and I ignoring each other was halted one day after Ryan simply stated, loud and clear, "I'm going out." It was the first time Emma and I had even looked at each other in a couple of days. It was the first Ryan had spoken coherent words in weeks. He did not look at us when he said it. And for some reason, neither of us protested. Maybe out of boredom, depression, or curiosity, we did not stop him. He walked over to the glass door and stood for a moment, never taking his eyes off the emptiness. He spoke to us, still facing the nothingness. "I'm going to learn its secrets, its power. I will become a god, and it welcomes me." He opened the door. He reached his hand out into the void. It looked like an optical illusion. Exactly where the doorframe was, as soon as he broke through that plane, his hand disappeared. All I could see was his wrist with nothing attached. He brought his arm back inside the room. His hand was missing. There was exposed bone, flesh, and tissue, but he did not bleed. He did not scream. He smiled. Then he walked out into the void, looking like a ghost walking through a wall. Emma and I stared in horror. She ran over to me and we cried together for a while. She said 7 words to me through thick sobs that chilled me to the bone, the first real sensation I've had since coming here. "Are we going to be here forever?"
Okay, let me just start off by saying that I know damn well that none of you are going to believe me. After all, at this stage in time, the idea of time travel is just barely moving from something which is shunned by the scientific community and world in general to its infancy of being taken seriously. And you have so many people who LARP as time travelers who truly aren't, even right here on Reddit. Hell, the time travel subreddit is full of them. But regardless of whether you believe or not, I assure you I am a real one. I will say right off the bat that I won't give you my real name for the simple reason that, well, I'm actually alive right now in 2023. To be more specific, the past version of me is alive right now, and I can't afford to let history change, for reasons I'll go into in a minute. I also won't get into much information about the future in relation to things such as politics or such, so please don't ask. But I suppose I should give a few rather vague details which may help convince you as time goes on that I'm telling the truth. It may help convince the right people that my warning is real. For starters, less than 2 or 3 decades from now, not only have the cures for cancer and other major debilitating diseases been found, but they can be administered from a simple vaccine shot. In a way, the pandemic we went through helped accelerate their development. We also end up making death itself more of a choice than an inevitability. Life extension research being conducted right now leads to both the ability to live for centuries, if not longer, but also retain our youthful bodies for as long as you wish. Which means many of you reading this might still be alive in my time. I was one of those who jumped on the bandwagon after they finished working the bugs out of it. I mean, imagine having the body of yourself in your 20s with all the knowledge and wisdom you accrue from living so long. Not to mention being able to do all the things which a single natural lifetime wouldn't allow. It gets some pushback at first by people who worry about living beyond a natural lifetime. Gasoline is banned by the halfway point of this century, but synthetic fuel means people aren't forced into electric cars, which I was extremely happy about because it meant I could keep driving my Cadillac DeVille around. Although many people get hooked on the flying car craze that happens toward the end of the 21st century. Not me, though. I prefer staying on the ground. Trust me, mid-air accidents are not pretty. However, space travel took off after the Artemis missions put people back on the moon a few years from now for you guys. And once the moon base and spaceport was constructed, well, it was off to the races from there. Vacations to planets like Mars, along with planetary moons such as Europa and Titan, become regular occurrences, even for those not so wealthy. And as for time travel, well, that took a little while longer than anticipated to actually work on. And that's the reason why I'm writing this now. You see, there were many discussions that happened as people began to take time travel more and more seriously. Not only to the future, which could already be done with time dilation, but to the past. It almost became as much of a race for every country in the world as the space race in the 60s had been. Everyone wanted to be written into the history books for eternity as the ones who finally invented the ability to travel through time itself. But people weren't really rushing like they used to when they only had a century or less to live. Scientists could work much longer without worrying about retiring or dying. During the first part of this time, I honestly wasn't a part of the endeavors myself. I had more or less turned my life around from the second I realized I would be able to live far longer than I thought I would before. I made something of myself, and without getting into too many specific details, as again, I want my identity to remain protected, I will say I became a best-selling author, an explorer who did everything from climbing Mount Everest on Earth and Olympus Mons on Mars to using the vast wealth I made from writing and other business endeavors to create underwater cities, similar in design to how Rapture from the BioShock video game looked. I was living my best life from the latter half of the 21st century to the midway point of the 23rd. But there was something that kept pulling away at my mind all throughout it. You see, I'd done so much, checked so many things off my bucket list, but there was one thing that hadn't happened yet. And if you guessed that it was that I wanted to time travel, then congratulations, you've just won a trip for 2 to Europa. Ever since I had been a little child, growing up at the very tail end of the 20th century and the early 21st, I'd wanted to visit the past. I wanted to do things such as attend the 9th annual Cannes Film Festival in 1956 to see Jacques Cousteau's The Silent World win the Golden Palm Award, see extinct animals such as the Barbary lion and the Tasmanian tiger, and travel across the oceans on the old ocean liners such as the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, for starters. That was how they hooked me into funding much of the research. You see, a venture capitalist, whose real name I won't use, but for the sake of telling this we'll call Reynolds, approached me as one of his first big investors. He'd heard me mention my desire to time travel during my book tours. Hell, I'd actually written an entire book series about it. That's why when he called me that day, I immediately shot straight up in my chair, paying close attention. "Son," he said over the video screen on my desk, "I've known for a long time now that you want to visit the past." I saw a smile break across his face. "Well, what if I told you that we are the ones closest to actually achieving it? And if you're willing to invest a little time and money into my project, that I will allow you to become one of the first to actually travel to the past." I leaned forward in my chair. "Well, then, I would say you now have my attention, Mr. Reynolds."
From that moment on, I was hooked. I was brought to his laboratory, where I was, honestly shocked to find he wasn't lying. They were closer than any of the hundreds of other government or private entities attempting to master it. Even to me, it was extremely complicated to understand, but I'll try and explain what he found in layman's terms. Many scientists, right now in this century, believe that if you traveled near a black hole, you would experience time dilation. This means 1 year near the edge of one would mean 80 years or so back on Earth. And it was already proven in 2990, when a space exploration which had left at the beginning of the 21st century came back looking exactly as they had almost a century prior. There's also a theory that black holes could work in reverse, operating as wormholes to both teleport and send people back in time. The issue is, it was found you'd need a particle accelerator almost 1 billion kilometers long, along with a stable wormhole. Both were almost a complete impossibility. Until Reynolds' team came up with a discovery. They were not only able to use a particle accelerator much smaller, but they were also able to create an artificial wormhole, a man-made black hole in their lab. Naturally, many people, myself included, were concerned about this. I asked Reynolds if there were any safeguards to prevent the artificial black hole from rapidly growing on its own volition. He pointed upwards at the particle accelerator hanging from the ceiling. "Victor, my boy, the particle accelerator has over 90 million sensors monitoring the hole, which, if they detect any kind of anomaly or rapid growth of its own volition beyond our parameters, it'll trigger an emergency shutdown which will zap the hole into non-existence." He slapped me on the back. "You have nothing to be concerned about." I took him for his word at it. So fucking stupid of myself to simply let it go at that. But I was blinded by how close we were to being able to conquer not only space, but time as well. And in the year 2338, we finally attempted our first use of the artificial wormhole to open a portal to the past. Nothing too far back in time, we decided for a dry run to only go as far back as 1 single year. Everyone, scientists, other investors, even the janitorial staff crowded into the lab's viewing area, anxious to see if the work which had taken trillions of dollars and literal centuries would actually pay off. And it did. To both our utter shock and amazement, the wormhole opened. Through the glass and through it, we could see something displayed on the other end of it. We saw the lab looking as it had this same time last year. That wasn't what made our jaws drop, though. They dropped because we saw ourselves. I could see myself being led around the chamber by Reynolds and his team, detailing me on the advancements we were now seeing the results of. I turned to Reynolds, finding him staring at the sight before us with such a sense of pride and accomplishment. I felt my own grin begin to stretch across my face. It's actually possible, I thought ecstatically in my head. After so many centuries of hoping, it's actually fucking possible. I saw Reynolds turn to me, the man's smile wider than my own, if that was possible. "Now, do you believe me, Victor?" he asked. For a moment, there was complete stillness in the viewing area, and then everyone burst into cheers and applause. We began shaking each other's hands and hugging each other, congratulating ourselves on achieving first what no one else had been able to. Reynolds then told us to keep what we'd seen under our hats. There was a scientific convention coming up in a few years where he wanted to reveal to the world our achievement. We were all too giddy and too busy basking in our own glory to stop to think about the implications of such a decision. Things such as safety protocols and proper procedures never crossed our minds. That mistake was not only the first major one, but the worst. I don't think what happened would have if we'd revealed our findings right there and then. We hit a few snags after that. You see, we could easily open up a wormhole to a few years back, just as easily to a few decades back. Hell, even a century and a half back took a little more energy, but was doable. And so was being able to cross from one end of the wormhole in the present to the past and returning. We created a portable version of the particle accelerator and wormhole, which allowed us to move from the present to the past. Theoretically, you could use the portable pad to keep hopping back in time further and further. However, to return to the present, you needed the main unit. No one could find a way to engineer returning into the portable pad. The problem was, the further into the past you wanted to go, the more energy was used, and the larger the wormhole had to be to traverse such a long distance. The particle accelerator began to short out at times, causing us to limit our explorations until repairs could be made. One of the investors, Travis, approached me after a meeting with Reynolds in the spring of 2045 to voice his concerns. What worries me is that if he attempts to open a portal too far back in time at once, it may short out the safeguards, Vic, he said, looking around to make sure he wasn't overheard. Reynolds had put most of us on edge as of late. If I was fixated on visiting the past, then he was utterly obsessed with it. He never let up on why, but the old photo of him and his mother, someone who'd passed centuries ago, gave me a small clue to his motives. But whenever we voiced our concerns now, instead of the placating replies and reassurances, he'd snap and almost seem like he was about to hit you. Honestly, I worry about it as well, but what can we do? I whispered back to him. Nobody besides us knows about how far along we are, and if we even try to mention anything to anyone outside of our group, God only knows what he'll do, especially where the reveal is less than 2 months away. Travis took a deep breath. I don't care. This is far too dangerous to keep hidden any longer. Someone has to tell someone outside. And with that, he turned and walked away. I watched him go, unaware that behind me, a tiny remote security bug had been watching us, before scampering away. I mulled over his words for about a month and a half, unsure what to do. Finally, with only a few days until the world reveal, I decided to return to the lab and speak to Reynolds. Unlike the others, the man was still somewhat friendly with me, and I felt still trusting enough to hear me out. I entered the lab using my personal key card, noting that he wasn't in his office. I could tell he'd been here recently, though. The coffee warmer on his desk still glowed slightly red, and the cup beside it still had steam rising out of it, so I turned and headed for the observation area. As I drew closer, I heard voices. I couldn't tell whose they were yet, and I began to slow as I heard what sounded like angry, almost frantic pleadings from one. I froze, feeling a chill run up my spine. Did someone break into the lab? I looked down, seeing a discarded metal pipe from a recent repair job, and picked it up. Feeling every muscle in my body tense up, I hit the button to open the pneumatic doors into the observation room and slid inside.
Nobody was in here, but I could now tell the voices were coming from the main room itself. I crouch-walked to the glass and slowly peeked over it. What I saw made me nearly drop the pipe. Reynolds stood in the room, almost directly under the particle accelerator. Around him were about 10 or 12 of his personal security team. That wasn't the worst sight, though. Oh, God. Travis lay on an old medical gurney, the types you used to see in old mental hospitals from the 20th century. His arms and legs were strapped tightly down, and he struggled to free himself from the restraints. The intercom into the room had been left on, and I could now hear what the voices were saying. "Listen, Reynolds," Travis shouted. "You don't know what you're doing. The wormhole is too unstable to demonstrate it before a crowd, especially where you want to open it up so far back in time at once. You don't know what'll happen." For a moment, Reynolds stayed silent. Then he began to chuckle. It wasn't a normal laugh, though. It sounded absolutely insane. I've seen, quite literally, millions of horror movies in my lifetime and heard so many insane, evil laughs. Hearing one for real, though, made me shudder. He began to speak back to Travis quietly, too softly for me to hear. But whatever he said made a look of complete horror fall over Travis's face. "Oh, my God," he moaned out. A feeling of dread began to course through me. Even though I didn't know what Reynolds had told him, I knew it wasn't good. The man patted Travis on the shoulder and finally said something I could make out. "You'll be the first, Travis. For my own eyes to see before the big reveal, and nothing you, Victor, or anyone else can do is going to stop me." He began to walk towards the exit. "Goodbye, Travis," he said, and then exited the lab. I knew where he was coming now. He was coming to the observation room, and God only knew what he'd do if he found me here. There was only a single door out of the room, though. I knew it was far too late to try and escape through it, though. The unhinged man was now on his way here and would see me exiting it. A rather large air duct with its cover off for repairs caught my eye, and I set down the pipe as I heard voices approach the door. One thing caught my eye before I climbed up into the vent, an object slouched in a canvas bag, and in the few seconds I had left, I snatched it up, then climbed onto the table in the middle of the room, and finally into the vent. I made it just in time, as I heard the pneumatic doors open less than a second later, and saw through the opening Reynolds and his goon step in and up to the glass. A moment later, the lights in the lab began to flicker and weaken. Horror as palpable as I ever felt surged through me. He's turning on the particle accelerator to open the wormhole. Through the glass, I saw Travis struggle in vain to break free. Below me, I heard Reynolds let out a low, evil chuckle. Then he turned to the man to his left. "Do it," he said flatly. In response, the man slammed his meaty fist into a red button on the side of the wall, and I had to slap both of my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. Have you ever heard about something called spaghettification? It's what scientists, both now in this time and in the future, call what happens when a black hole swallows an object in its path, whether it's a star, a planet, or in this case, a person. The wormhole opened, and as it did, Travis began to scream. It was the most pained, agonizing scream I've heard a human being make. As it did, I saw both him and the gurney begin to get pulled toward the opening black hole. That wasn't the most horrible part, though. As he approached it, both he and the gurney seemed to begin to stretch out, and at the same time compress, as if he was Laffy Taffy being stretched and pulled on a machine. His scream began to sound off, tinny. It rose several octaves. They say that if a human being was sucked into a black hole, the process of spaghettification would be one of the most horrific, painful ways to die. I can confidently say they were fucking understating that hypothesis. It was all over in a span of about 20 seconds for us, but I knew for Travis what had been seconds for us had been an eternity of dying for him, due to time dilation. The accelerator was turned off, and the black hole wavered for a moment before vanishing. When it was gone, Reynolds turned to his men. "Ready the plans and items needed for the world reveal. I want everything to be in place for when it's time," he said. One guard nodded. "Yes, sir, we'll have it all ready." The man I'd once considered my partner and friend began to walk towards the door when the guard called after him. "And if Victor should come poking his nose around here while you're gone?" he asked. I felt a fresh surge of fear and horror splash through me as the question was answered. "Then end him the same way we did Travis. I'll not have him interfering in this. Actually," he held up a finger, "don't do that. Go out after this and find him. Put him in my personal jet and put him the farthest distance away. He deserves what's coming almost more than anyone else, and I want him to be one of the last to go." And with that, he turned and strode out of the lab. I couldn't help but shake uncontrollably in the cramped metal space at his words, as the guards gathered some papers and equipment, then left the lab.
It took me a long time to climb down from that vent and sneak out of the lab. I was terrified that I'd be caught at any moment. But I managed to make it out unseen. I didn't go back to my home, any of my homes across the world, actually. I knew there'd be men at all of them waiting for me. Instead, I did something I hadn't in centuries and returned to my poor and humble roots. I first withdrew all the money and gold I could from my bank accounts, knowing I'd need it, and ended up taking refuge in an extremely run-down motel in the city, one that advised itself as an authentic early 20th century motel experience. It was for technophobes, people who were afraid or hated technology, to stay when needing to go out from their homes. While there, I frantically tried contacting anyone I could to warn them, especially after discovering a typed, printed-out speech, something I hadn't seen in centuries, stuffed into a pocket of the bag. Most of it related to the reveal speech, but the last part was what caused me to try calling anyone in power in such a panic. Even now, the words of what turned into a twisted manifesto still fill me with such horror I can't describe. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I must end this presentation with a bit of an admission. This device can indeed open a wormhole through time. It can allow humanity to traverse time and space, allow us to move freely to the past and future at will. But that was only a side effect. It was not what I secretly designed this machine for in the first place. You see, humanity, to me, as it is now, is abhorrent. It's disgusting, an aberration. It has been ever since I was a child and had my mother and father educate me on how evil a species we were, to the environment, to each other, and to the universe as a whole. They both became anti-natalists in their older age and passed those views on to me. At first, I didn't understand why they and those like them wanted not just humans, but all sapient, sentient life to cease to exist. But as the centuries have gone on, I have come to understand their views. Humans were never meant to live this long. Many of us, both here in the audience and watching at home, were never meant to live as long as we have. We all should have done the right thing and died a long time ago. It's disgusting to let ourselves live on. Every year I kept living was one I hated. But I know I'll never get the majority of others to agree with my views, our views, the anti-natalists. And so, in secret, I have worked with them for centuries on a final plan to make the choice for you, for all of us. None of you deserve to keep living beyond today. None of us either. All sapient, sentient life in the universe needs to do the right thing and cease to exist. And none of you deserves to be able to travel through time. This is the moment for humanity, for everything, to end. And it's too late to escape. May the universe be bettered by the erasure of all life. Goodbye. And now, I should probably explain why I'm telling you all this. How I managed to travel.
I'm a scientist, but I've always had an interest in what science deems is not real. I live near the Appalachian Mountains, and I hike there often. I probably know all of the legends from that area, so when work calls me to different regions, I always spend time learning about their local legends too. I don't know if I really believed any of these stories, just because history is so often misinterpreted. About a month ago, I was called to Romania. It was really out of the way, and I don't usually go to Europe for work, but Romania is a beautiful country, and I would never turn down this opportunity. As I was packing, I debated bringing my journal, where I keep track of the legends I learn about. I was torn. While Romania is known for vampires and Transylvania and such, I also find vampires to be one of the most silly legends, which happens to be one of the most popular. But I ended up bringing it, though I already have information about vampires.
Ionrimaru and Jure Grando are some of the most spoken about. I thought that maybe the locals might have stories I can write down. I threw the little black book on top of my suitcase and continued to get ready for my flight in the morning. The plane ride was going to be long, and I was sure to land in cloudy weather, but I was still excited to arrive. An emergency landing was put in place, something about a late plane taking up space. I stepped off my plane onto the tarmac. Sure enough, I was surrounded by thick fog as I waited for my shuttle to arrive. I noticed that there were only a handful of travelers that were on my plane. Most of them appeared to be locals, speaking Romanian to each other during the ride. "You look American, are you?" I heard an unfamiliar voice ask me. I turned to face the voice. "Yes, I am," I replied shallowly. The plane ride had put me in a bad mood. The young man who was speaking with me looked disappointed. "Look, I'm going to be here for a while, and I don't have a ton of people to talk with. So here's my card. Call me if you want," he said as he passed me a small white business card. I scanned it quickly before sticking it in my pocket. I nodded at the man and smiled. I appreciated his gesture. I was simply too upset to say anything. I arrived at my hotel almost 3 hours later. It was a ways away from the airport in Bucharest. I was staying in Brasov, so I had to take a cab. I sat on my bed and turned on the television. The channels were in Romanian, but I figured that it would be good background noise while I figured out the rest of my schedule. I would attend my meeting at 9, then be finished at 12:30. I would have the rest of the day to speak with the locals. The next day, I would get breakfast, then make my way over to the research center and hopefully have some more time to explore the history of the city. I decided to make my plans for Bucharest once I was there. That morning, I got ready quickly and made my way to my meeting. Walking through the cobbled streets, I felt as though eyes were on me. When I glanced around the street, I saw it was empty, but my feeling still lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I got goosebumps. I figured the odd suspicion would subside when I got into my meeting, which it did. My meeting was long and tedious. It made me tired. I would have gone home and slept if I wasn't so excited to hear the local legends. I left my meeting and headed to a local cafe. Then I again felt as though someone was watching me. I squinted out the window into the fog and saw 2 small lights which appeared to be glaring directly at me. I was immediately taken aback. The 2 lights could have been car beams, but the roads were strangely empty. I didn't finish my coffee. I left the cup there and left. I wanted to get back to my room as quickly as I could. When I arrived back to my room, I expected a sense of relief, but I did not receive it. Instead, my eerie feeling that someone was watching me lingered. I tried to relax. I took a shower and poured myself a glass of bourbon. I read a bit, but nothing helped me. It was almost 2 p.m. when I left my room again, this time more cautious, checking that I locked my door multiple times before I left. I was paranoid. I found myself constantly looking around to find the source of my unease. Still, I couldn't locate it. I walked down the street leading to the town square, my journal in hand and shaking off my nervous feeling. I stepped into an old library and found an older woman who, luckily, spoke English. "Would you come get lunch with me and help me translate a book?" I asked her. The book was old. It was about local legends and the town's history. She agreed, and I helped her walk to a shop nearby. She smiled the entire time at me. She told me she was happy to help me, that she loved foreigners, but she doesn't see them often. "What is the book?" she asked me. When I told her it was about the legends, her face dropped. I could tell she was nervous, but still she helped me. She would pause between her summarizes to interrupt the book, informing me this book was vague or that it was wrong. She took the time to tell me all the stories she's heard and what the locals believe. I carefully took notes as she spoke. I had paid for our meal and helped the woman to her apartment before finding myself sitting in the lobby deciding what to do next. As I snapped out of my fantasy world of monsters and legends, I began feeling unease again. I felt eyes watching me again. I glanced around and was met with the same eerie absence of presence. This town looked almost abandoned, and the longer I stayed there, the faster I wanted to leave. I left the building and quickly found the nearest ticket booth. I bought an overnight ticket to Bucharest. I disregarded my plans and rushed back to my hotel room, packing up all my belongings before I caught a taxi to the train station. I suddenly felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I peered out the window and saw the two lights staring at me again. Though this time I was aware these were not lights. They were eyes. It was part of the legend the woman had told me. The eyes belonged to a creature called a strigoi. The locals believed the strigoi had become territorial. I don't know why I didn't make this connection before. I was put into a state of shock. The creature had been stalking me. That's why I felt as if I was being watched. I was. I waited impatiently at the train station, situated between the largest crowd of people there, which must have been no more than 5 or 6 people. I felt safer with them. The train ride wasn't long. In fact, it felt short. Maybe it was the relief I got from leaving Brasov and those eyes behind. I now felt that I may have been dramatic. There was no way a strigoi was stalking me like prey. I found the nearest hotel in Bucharest. I didn't unpack. I just laid down and tried to sleep. In the morning, I unpacked and went over to the Bucharest library, looking up as much about the strigoi as I could. Suddenly, I heard a gasp. My head darted towards the sound. I was met with the image of a frightened woman looking out the window at a tall, ghastly figure in the distance. It followed me here. I was shocked. It looked vaguely like the photos in the book from yesterday. The wind blew the glass door to the library open. The sound caught everyone's attention, and when I looked back at the monster outside, it had vanished. I turned to the only thing I could turn to. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the card of the man I met on the plane. He picked up on the second ring. "Hello?" he spoke first. "Hi, I'm the guy from the plane. I was at a loss for words. I think I'm being stalked by a Romanian monster, and I don't know who else to call," I continued. The man on the other line was silent. I could hear him breathing, trying to decide what to say. "You're not serious. You can't be serious," he said. I couldn't tell if he was angry or just in disbelief. If I were him, I would have just hung up. "Please, come quickly to the library," I asked him, though my words sounded like pleads. He hung up on me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I stayed in the library, reading, hoping maybe there was some kind of warding. I had been searching frantically when I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. Goosebumps scattered across my skin, and my body shivered. I turned, slowly and fearfully. To my surprise, I was met with the worried face of the man from the plane. "Is it happening to you too?" he asked me. He nervously glanced around. He was paranoid too. "The strigoi? Is it following you?" I asked him, curiously. He nodded. "Since I landed," he told me. His voice was shaking while he spoke. I urged him to leave the library with me, to go back to my room so we could speak privately. He followed me. The streets of Bucharest weren't as lively as I had expected, yet still they were much more lively than Brasov. Once we entered my hotel room, a wave of relief washed over both me and the man. I heard him let out a sigh as I shut and locked the door. "Daniel, by the way," he said suddenly. "Sam, nice to meet you," I said as I shook his hand. I sat down at the small coffee table in the corner of the room. Daniel didn't. Instead, he went to look out the window. "It's a shame. The city is so beautiful and yet ruined by the presence of that beast." He pitted himself as he spoke. "My life will never be the same, assuming I live long enough to get out of this abysmal city. Daniel, you're going to live. I'm not going to allow the strigoi to come near either us, let alone kill us," I said, trying to put a stop on his rampage of despair. Daniel had just started to formulate his response when he heard a knock at the door. "I'll get it." Daniel walked across the room, opening the door. I paid this no mind until I heard a bizarre gurgling sound. I leaned back in my chair to see Daniel's limp body wedged between the doorway, his blood spilling into the hotel hallway and his head nowhere in sight. I was frozen.
I didn't.
I'm from Connecticut. I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia and would often make road trips down to visit her. I don't really mind. I love road trips. I've driven across the United States and back, all on my own. There's just something about traveling the highways of the U.S. by yourself that's just so freeing. To save money, I would sleep in my car. It's not so bad. It's basically camping. In a metal tent. Makes you feel like you're really roughing it. I just recline the seat back, keep my key in the ignition just in case, and doze off. No, I don't put anything up to block the windows for privacy. Maybe I should have. The trip down south is a comfortable 2-day drive. My stop would usually be somewhere along the Virginia-North Carolina border, so for my previous trip, that's exactly where I stopped that night. Rest stops were often less trafficked, and thus quieter than truck stops. Normally, I would have stopped at a Love's, but I was so tired that I settled for the first rest stop I saw. It was oddly vacant that night, with only a couple lone cars sitting forlorn under the amber street lamps. Most likely travelers with the same idea as myself. I pulled into a parking spot away from the others, under the shadow of a tree and far from the street lamps. I figured I would have more privacy there, as opposed to being bathed in light. So, I did my usual thing, locked my doors, opened the window just a hair for ventilation, kept my key in, reclined the seat, and went to sleep. I was never interrupted on any of these car camping nights, so I never suspected anything on this one. Then, a sharp tap woke me up. At first, I thought I had heard it in my dream. I opened my eyes, a bit confused. Since I was leaned back, I was facing the ceiling and couldn't see anything. I hear another tap, like a tiny object hitting a hard surface. It came in an irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping onto my windshield? I'm under a tree, maybe something fell from the branches. Maybe a squirrel or a bird was dropped something? What if a squirrel was climbing around my car? Or what if it wasn't an animal? The thought occurred to me that it might very well be a person poking around outside. What did they want? Were the doors locked? Yes. The keys were in the ignition. I can leave in an instant. Still, I lay there completely still, pretending I hadn't heard anything, hoping whoever it was, they would leave me alone. It was better not to find out. I was too afraid to find out. It was better to stay here in blissful ignorance. Still, the tapping continued. I had to do something. There was no way I was just going to stay there. I had to look. My heart was pounding. In that moment, it was deafeningly loud. Whoever was out there could probably hear it. I decided. I was going to look. I was going to raise my head up and see what was making the noise. So that's what I did. What met my eyes sent a jolt through my entire body. Every muscle fiber locked up in pure shock at what I saw. The faint glow of the street lamps cast just enough light for me to make out what I was looking at. There in the windshield, staring directly at me, was a face. Someone I presumed to be a woman was lying on my hood, her face pressed right up against my windshield. Her face was completely still, locked in a permanent grin. I froze in overwhelming terror. The eyes I stared into appeared to have rolled back, showing only the whites. The nose was turned up, pressed painfully into the glass. The lips stretched wide, revealing horrid, rotten teeth. Even in the darkness, I could tell her skin was sickly pale, contrasting her long, filthy black hair. Whoever this was, she was clearly not in her right mind. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to move. Finally, I got a grip on myself and shot my hand to the ignition. It turned over, making, in that instant, the most beautiful sound I ever heard. For a split second, I was afraid I might be caught in a horror movie scenario, the one where the car won't crank as the killer approaches. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about that because as soon as I stopped, the woman leapt off, landing on all fours. Seeing my opportunity, I shifted into drive and gunned it, right as I saw her reaching for the driver's side door. With my foot on the gas, I sped out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a piercing shriek like that of an animal. I looked in my rearview mirror, and for a split second I thought I saw her chasing me, running on all fours, her black hair swinging wildly around her. I couldn't get a good look as I rounded a curve in the road leading out of the rest stop and merged with the highway. There, I picked up speed and drove through the night. I did not dare stop again until I saw the morning light.
I am using this phone to type this to anyone who is reading and anyone who can help me. Anyone who is reading, someone, anyone. Let me explain. Ever since I was 5 years old, I was able to do something incredible. Nobody ever believed me, and at first I thought I had a really vivid imagination. I can travel anywhere, to other worlds by only creating a photo in my mind. Whatever I see projects in front of me, and I jump to the universe that closest resembles my picture. It first started at my 5th birthday when my parents bought me a puppy for my birthday. I did not want a puppy. I wanted that beautiful red bicycle I saw at the store. I was fueled by the bad, ungrateful attitude I had, where I would be angry and throw tantrums when I did not get what I wanted. I ended up seeing a window in front of me with the bicycle. My imagination was powerful, so I reached out and tried to touch it and pulled through what I can remember as a portal. It felt like a dream, and I did not quite understand what was happening. I suddenly relived the day from the beginning, and instead I received the bicycle for my birthday and had vanilla instead of chocolate cake. Slight difference. It wasn't something I could really maintain for a long time, so once I went to sleep, the following day I would wake up to my original reality. I was really disappointed when I woke up and there was a dog sitting on my bedroom floor. At first it seemed like a dream until it kept happening. Once I had some more common sense when I was 10 years old, I started to paint the picture of my desires intentionally and end up temporarily living the life I wanted. I practiced and became more aware that I had a really interesting ability. The only downside at the time seems to be that it was temporary. Either way, it was fun, and I got a glimpse of living the life I wanted for small periods. It became my escape and made me happy for a small time. This became my favorite activity, and I spent most of my time doing this, perfecting it and getting really confused about how fluid my identity and reality really was. I kept doing this with a large portion of my life to see exactly how things would turn out with each different decision I made. I just wish I could stay longer, but as soon as I was tired, I could no longer keep the window open. This was creating a certain psychological issue where I couldn't face hurt or disappointment and became more obsessed with changing that reality. No personal growth whatsoever. When I had my first girlfriend, it was great. I didn't spend much time really traveling between universes. I did not need to. I had everything I wanted at the time. When she started playing with my feelings, I jumped around to see the worlds where she wasn't doing that, and I jumped more to see what happened if I actually dated her sister instead of her. When she inevitably broke my heart and left me for another guy, I went to a world where that never happened there and lingered as long as I could, avoiding the issue of having to deal with and sift through my feelings and recover from the heartache. Eventually, I got bored, got over it, and explored the multiverse with the rest of the decisions I was making, experiencing them from different points. I had a church my parents used to drag me to as a child. I even had a childhood crush there, but it wasn't my cup of tea, and I really wished it was more youth-friendly. My parents were religious, so I had no choice but to go along with them. I used my skills to travel to a dimension where the church was a lot more fun, but honestly, it felt weird. This was not a church. It was suddenly a cult. The pastor was sleeping with the females in the congregation, having rituals around a fire, and eventually every guy shaved his head, wore a gray robe, and had to give up their possessions. I noped the hell out of there. Then I got fixated on this girl I had a crush on. It was from a really young age that I thought she was something special. She was always really unbothered by boys. She was so innocent, so energetic. All she wanted was to enjoy herself, singing, doing her schoolwork, and playing her sports. I traveled to a place where she was interested in me, and day after day I went back there to see what our life was like. I lingered around for 5 years, doing this on a daily basis and exhausting myself, but somehow in that reality, she died while being alive in my original reality. What the hell? I tried shifting through the realities like a really fast channel surfing sessions, but no luck. I could not get another world like the one we lived. Either she cheated or she broke up with me. One of them, she switched towns when she was young, and in the final world, she dated girls. This was a moment of clarity, Art. She could be so beautiful no matter where she was or what she was doing, but I'm glad to see that she was still alive. I tried to be her friend in quite a few of these worlds. Every time that worked out just fine. All of this got interrupted by my parents' divorce. Now my whole world shattered. Nothing made sense, and I felt even more alone and confused than before. Suddenly, nothing else mattered. I jumped and jumped, trying to find a place where I felt safe. I wound up in a reality where I lived with my dad, got to party like crazy, and go out all the time. That was an interesting experience. I still think about it sometimes. Another reality I wound up in, I decided to live with my mom and we left town. We were rather poor and struggling. I ended up dropping out of school. I even found a reality where they were still together, but they really were not happy or getting along and eventually did wind up divorcing. It was one of those safe together for the kids situations. I eventually depressingly settled back into my first world and learned to survive. Mostly the alternatives were just as bad, and you can't really run away from certain things no matter how much you try. And your experiences stay with you no matter where you go. I essentially had been living 1,000 years worth of life in one lifetime. That was my point of view. Since I lived every day like 100 times in different dimensions, patiently trying to live the best version and have a better story to tell, I didn't realize at the time that being 35 years old now, that would be the equivalent of living 3,000 years or more. More on this later. There's so many more instances, more mundane day-to-day experiences. My final school year, the day I graduated, the day I got my driver's license, the first car I drove, the first time I had sex, the first cigarette in hundreds of different venues and for hundreds of different reasons, the day I had a lasting relationship again, the day I finally got married, and throughout the years of parenting, trying to find a place in this multiverse where I was doing it just right, I tried to find a world where my parents lived a little longer so I could have more time with them. How ironic. I spent all my childhood obsessed over different universes and didn't spend time with them. But once they were gone in my timeline, I traveled just about everywhere just to see them again. They weren't the same, though. The people I knew no longer existed. I lived thousands of years, but not really taking the time to realize what is really important, therefore not really making the best of the lives I had at all, with no way of even redoing it. What I didn't realize at the time was how the subconscious determines the things we see and inevitably change the projection of the pictures I create, pulling me into worlds I never intended to go. When you're inexperienced and have no one who can help you, you never know what you can get yourself into. Even then, a large portion of the places I went to more frequently became like checkpoints, and I would go there much easier, especially when I was stressed. It was fun. I felt like a god. I would be going through realities like flipping through a TV channel, channel by channel. After a while, it became easy, and I would linger at the places I loved the most. I thought I was the only one who did all the special kind of things. When you make the assumption that nobody can see you or teach you, there are things that take longer to master. I had no idea. No one in the world knew, and I was a god. Sadly, I was mistaken because now I've caught the attention of someone. Every time I jumped to the day I got married, the man stood at the corner of the room. He had never been there before until 2 weeks ago. He stood at the corner of the room. He definitely stood out. Bald, middle-aged man with glasses, a suit, and an earpiece. I'm sure if I had lifted the shirt up, I would have seen a firearm. I paid no attention to it until I started seeing him speak to people. I thought I would avoid that day for a while and just go other places. To my amazement, he started showing up to a lot of places I frequented. Today, he brought friends, 4 other men with the same attire, and they looked intent on catching me alone. I was spooked and needed to get out, go to a place I'd never been before, hide somewhere. This has never happened in all these years, and it's hard to understand why suddenly it seems like I have been found. I took a jump to a quiet place. A moment when I was 6 years old where I was sitting with my mom while my dad was at work. He used to work a 12-hour-a-day shift, and my mom stayed with me all day. We spent a lot of time together during the day. She taught me some basic math, how to write my name, memorize phone numbers, and we did many puzzles together. On this particular day, we were just playing music and dancing together. This was a memory I found perfect and was never willing to change. I would be like a fly on the wall, and there should be no traces of my activity there. I would become a child, and no one would recognize me. I was really shocked to find myself being followed. As I landed, I saw them land with me. This time, these men seemed really intent on catching me, more violent. They drew their weapons, so I jumped again and again and started running. See it as someone running across a film strip, running between dimensions as they're being chased. It didn't take them long to catch up, as if they had an energy connection to me. I don't know how I can hide. I ran to an old memory of the church when I was young, one of the days we were practicing for some or other stage performance. I think it was David and Goliath. I ran and hid between the cars, and they ran past. As I ran, I saw a friend of mine. This person is supposed to meet me approximately 20 years from now, but broad as daylight, here she is. I ran to the car where she honked at me and told me to get in. "Catherine, what are you doing here?" I asked,